Stand! Stand! Stand!
You want to dance? Ask me nicely. Let's talk. Better listen very carefully.
No problem.
You having fun?
No!
Thanks.
So welcome to episode 2 of Jean-Claude Van Damme, the podcast where we talk about Van Damme movies because he kicks good. And joining me today is my friend Amanda Lett. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very excited to be here.
Awesome. And so we usually, meaning in the one other episode I've done of this, start by you saying what your first experience with Van Damme was, your basic thoughts on him, and why you chose what you did for today's episode.
Okay. So I have a confession.
Uh-oh.
And I don't want you to like run out of the room screaming. This is one of the thing that I picked today, which is the 2-part episode of Friends that actually aired after the Super Bowl in the second season. It's only the second thing I've ever seen Jean-Claude Van Damme in. The only other
Show's over! No!
I knew this was going to happen. No, the only other thing that I've seen is Time Cop.
That is awesome. Actually, there is another person that was wanting to guest, another person from the Dissolve group, and he had never seen any Van Damme movies, so he didn't know what to pick, and I was thinking Time Cop. That seemed like it would be a good introductory one.
I think I went to see it with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I saw it like as a matinee in the theater. So it, came out in a theater. It wasn't like a direct DVD thing.
No, this is him being big. That was him at his height.
I feel like that was his moment, and I want to say that this episode of Friends is capitalizing on that. I think this is probably maybe about the same time.
I think Time Cop was 94, and this was early 96. And yes, you did mention that it did air. It was a 2-parter, but it was basically just an hour-long episode that aired after the Super Bowl in 1996.
Yes.
Which I remember. I watched that Super Bowl and then watched this afterwards.
I never watched Friends until it was in syndication.
Mm.
And then it was on when I would get home from work, and I would just put it on because I didn't want to think. And
Well, that helps.
It helps. And it's like, I'm going to pour myself a glass of wine, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to watch Friends, and I'm not going to talk to anybody for an hour.
I should have had wine with this. That would have made it better.
I do, but I was like, no, I'm going to be a responsible podcaster, a responsible interview subject, and not get drunk.
Whenever I do my other podcast, which is me and Cole, we are always drinking during it.
See, that's probably the better thing to do. That's probably...
It loosens you up a little bit.
Yeah, I probably should have done that first. But yeah, so, this Friends episode, which stars all sorts of people.
So many people.
There were so many celebrity cameos in this episode.
And it's crazy. Like, again, they had a big thing. They had all of these stars because it was going to air after the Super Bowl. And I basically watched it because my dad liked football, so I watched the Super Bowl.
Right,
and then
sure.
my stepmom at the time liked Friends, so we watched that afterwards, too.
Yeah, I was trying to, when I was watching it again, I'm thinking, what was the overlap here? How did this, where it's just like, yeah, Super Bowl, woo! And then people are like, oh, let's check out this show. Let's check out some Friends.
Which, yeah, and I remember even at the time on NBC, all the promos they had, like, pimping all the guest stars that were going to be on it and saying how it's going to be this huge television event.
Yeah, I mean, Julia Roberts is on it.
I don't know what the hell she's doing here.
I have to assume she lost a bet. I have to assume.
Poor Julia Roberts having to make out with Matthew Perry.
I know! It makes no sense. There's nothing about that plotline that makes any sense. Brooke Shields.
Yeah, it makes more sense, and I think she was having a ball.
Oh, yeah, no, I was watching it, and I thought, why isn't she on a soap opera? Because she's nailing this.
I'm surprised she wasn't.
So well. Yeah, I don't know if she's ever done one, but I was just like, she's nailing this weird pretend drama really well.
Absolutely. And this was, of course, the highest watched show in the entire show's history. Like, the highest watched episode.
Was was it? I
Because
did
they
not
got
know.
all that Super Bowl people.
Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, after you've eaten a ton of chicken wings, you want to sit and watch the Friends.
I was surprised that this was from 96 and it was only the second season of Friends. Like, with as much as it was hyped up, I thought this was way later in the run. I thought this was season, 5 or 6 in the later 90s.
And I guess they were trying to sort of make it their new hip, because it was part of the must-see TV lineup and everything. I think, it's weird to me, also to sort of see all the Friends with their original parts.
Yeah.
Timeline.
Well, even when you see the opening, you can see how much they've changed in the 2 years they've been on the air from the original opening, how much they've aged and kind of look more like adults than they did originally.
Yeah. There's a lot of sort of settling down that I think happens, but it's a good episode. I mean, I feel like it's got sort of the familiar beats. You've got all the, they're not trying to shoehorn in anything crazy or random. They've finally gotten rid of the damn monkey.
Yeah, but they bring the monkey back for this episode.
Which is just awful.
And I have to admit now, because of that stepmom I had that was obsessed with Friends, I watched most of Friends for the 3 or 4 years that she was in our family.
Yeah.
And I forgot how bad this show is. It's really not very good. It was okay. I laughed a good bit during this episode, but I think it's been maybe just because I just watch stuff on streaming services. I don't really watch a lot of sitcoms and stuff. It had been so long since I watched a show with a laugh track. It was off-putting.
It's real strange.
Yeah.
I think in this, we're so used to sort of Arrested Development or The Office or something,
Yeah. Or I just finished the first season of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which is a phenomenal show, and I can't imagine a sitcom like that's on TV having a laugh track with it.
Yeah, pausing for jokes to land, and then, but I feel as far as early days Friends go, this is a really sort of representative set of 2 episodes that gets us to know our friends.
It actually does, and every one of them gets a good little storyline or gets good character moments in the episode. And I remembered within 2 minutes of starting to watch these 2 episodes, I was like, oh yeah, I remember everything that happens in these.
Exactly, I know, it's so familiar. I think that's why it was one of those things I would watch after work, because it was so familiar.
Yeah.
And it just didn't matter what was going on in the world or what was going. It's Friends is going to be the same. It's going to be fine. They're going to get into some sort of scrape, and then it's going to be funny, and then it'll be over.
Well, I guess that's just what sitcoms are for. They're just for comfort. They're comfort food, pretty much.
It's just comfort food. So, which one is your least favorite Friend?
Oh, I have to go Matthew Perry. I hate Chandler. I hate him so much. Yeah.
Controversial opinion.
I mean, they're all pretty terrible. I think, I don't know. My favorite is probably Phoebe. Lisa Kudrow is amazing. And David Schwimmer is kind of a close second. He can be kind of annoying, but pretty much, I hate most of the people on this show.
I hate them all. Usually Ross.
Yeah.
It's Ross is the worst.
I don't know. I actually thought he was kind of endearing in this episode, though. Just his sadness over his lost monkey friend.
Yeah, that's the only thing he's got driving him right now. It's just sadness over his monkey.
Which, of course, this is a podcast about Jean-Claude Van Damme, but this is basically going to be a Friends podcast for an episode, because he has what amounts to maybe 2 minutes of screen time.
He does. And when I had selected this, I remembered it being slightly bigger.
So did I. I thought he was in both episodes, which I was shocked that he wasn't in the first one, and he had maybe 3 or 4 scenes in the second episode. So first, I was kind of mad that I watched the first episode, because I didn't need to. But 2, I remembered him having a much bigger role, but I think it was just those promo ads that all had Jean-Claude Van Damme in them, and made it seem like he was a big part of it.
Yeah, I was really surprised too, because I remembered, okay, the monkey is on the set, in Outbreak 2, what is it, The Virus Takes Manhattan?
The Virus Takes Manhattan, yes, which, again, most of the show is kind of terrible, but everything actually involving Jean-Claude Van Damme in that movie shoot I thought was great. I would love to see Van Damme in Outbreak 2.
I did like there was one joke that I particularly enjoyed where your favorite Matthew Perry was talking to the guys in the hazmat suits.
Oh, so you guys in the movie?
Are you extras or are you just really paranoid? I did like that joke.
Yeah, I think it's a thing to where he does make me laugh every once in a while in the show, but I hate him so much, it makes me mad when he makes me laugh.
He seems very smug, I think is the Matthew Perry thing.
And I don't know, I've seen a number of Matthew Perry movies as well. I don't know why. I keep watching. But of course I've seen like Fools Rush In and Serving Sarah and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was on TBS. And it was just, no, this is fine. Whatever. It's just going to go on. But yeah, so it's Jean-Claude Van Damme's part is really who's going to get to date him, Rachel or Monica.
Yeah, and he gets, like I said, maybe 2 minutes of screen time, but he is adorable and charming the entire time, even though he's kind of a creep a little bit.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a creep, but he was kind of funny.
Yeah.
And charming, and it's something that I don't think you would expect from Jean-Claude Van Damme to do.
Not at that point, because at that point he was still, like, in 94 when Time Cop came out, which was his biggest, like, mainstream hit. That same year, Street Fighter also came out, which was his biggest flop. So
right.
He was having a weird time, and I think the next year, 95, he had just done Sudden Death. So this was like, he was still pretty big. This is before the direct-to-video years, so it made sense that like he was a huge name to have in this show.
Yeah, and I think, there's that scene with him and Monica where she just keeps going, can you beat that guy up? Can you beat that guy up? So, I think that's
honestly how I would be if I hung out with him.
So you were totally in the moment there. You believed it. You felt it.
I was like, I am exactly Courtney Cox right now. Like, I would do that. I was like, can you beat him up?
This speaks to my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I think so he kind of has this feel of, he's like this big, he's going to beat your ass and he's going to do some badass, moves. And he's actually kind of cracking jokes and being a love interest.
Yeah, which is nice because he doesn't, like, most of the time the female love interests in his movies are barely there and, like, just kind of there to give him a case of the not gays. Not real characters. And then it wasn't until the last few years where he's done more comedy stuff. Like, he did the movie Welcome to the Jungle, which he was great in, and, like, commercials and stuff where he's playing with his persona and being funny. So this was kind of, like, groundbreaking for him to do in 96.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too as I'm watching this. I was like, it really is trying to play against sort of perceptions of him in a fun way in 4 lines of dialogue, basically.
But in only 4 lines of dialogue, he still gets to make reference to having a 3-way with Drew Barrymore.
He does. I was surprised how much Drew Barrymore came up in this episode.
I'm surprised she wasn't a guest. Maybe they tried to get her as a guest, and she wasn't able to do it, or turned it down, so they just made fun of her in the episode.
Drew Barrymore's too good for Friends. Well, we'll show her.
To be fair, she is too good for Friends.
Well...
So is Julia Roberts. That is baffling to me that she was in this. So let's go through all the other cameos in it, because you, of course, we mentioned Julia Roberts and Brooke Shields. Chris Isaac was in the first episode. Fred Willard shows up at some point, which I thought was great.
I do enjoy a good Fred Willard cameo. Anytime, any place.
Yeah, anytime he shows up for a minute or so, that pretty much makes whatever you're doing better.
Yeah. I liked his line about sometimes monkeys die. It's not a good saying, but it's true in this case. I thought was I just liked his delivery of it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, he's great in it, and he is one of the best parts. Julia Roberts, like, she seems so game for what's going on in the episode, but she just feels so out of place.
Yeah, she's too movie star. Yeah. You know what I mean? She's too famous.
And the character she's playing, is she a makeup artist on the film?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
She was just a makeup artist whose hair and makeup were clearly better than anyone else's.
Well, hey, I guess if you're a makeup artist, your own makeup's going to be fire.
So, it was sort of like, there's Julia Roberts, and then there's the rest of the cast of the show.
They just look like mutants compared to her.
It really did, and that's so weird to say. Because Courtney Cox and Jennifer Aniston and Lisa Kudrow, I mean, they're not slouches, but they're not Julia Roberts. They don't have this.
Oh yeah, she's on an entirely different level.
Exactly. So yeah, she's a makeup artist on the movie.
And basically, she went to elementary school with Chandler, and in the 4th grade, he lifted up her dress and exposed her underwear to the entire class during the school play.
And she's hated him with a passion ever since.
Yes, which we don't really find out till later. She mentions that, but then she's all about him, and even he's like, why is this happening?
Echoing what we as the audience are feeling at that moment in time. Let's be true. Let's be real.
But basically, her plotline is just one big con to embarrass Chandler the way he embarrassed her when she was a child.
Yes.
Which I think is one of the better plot lines in the show. Mostly just because it was like, oh, Chandler got embarrassed and someone did something bad to him. That makes me happy.
Chandler's always been like this.
Yeah.
It wasn't just something he picked up. He's always been like this. Yeah, and then, of course, so Brooke Shields is the crazy, obsessed Dr. Drake Ramore stalker who doesn't understand the difference between real life and television.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like if it wasn't Brooke Shields, like, this character could have been recurring on Friends. Like, I feel like this is something they could have gotten a lot more traction out of.
Yeah. I mean, I think it actually could have been fun. It's Brooke Shields, you know. Wasn't she married to, like, Andre Agassi at the time or something? She had other things on her plate.
Probably. But no, she's having a ball and just overacting and just being crazy, kind of like they mentioned in the episode, a little bit like Kathy Bates in Misery. Or I guess that's in, talking about the stalker. But yeah, no, she's great and plays crazy really well. And I guess there was a movie kind of about that a little bit a couple years later, I think. It was called Nurse Betty. It had Renee Zellweger, where she played someone that was like, I think she got a head injury or something, but thought she was in a soap opera or thought it was real or something.
Right, but then there were people chasing after her. Yeah. Oh, Renee.
Friends, man, it's inspiring the world.
Everywhere. Dan Castellaneta.
Yes, of course. He played, I don't remember the character name, but the other guy at the zoo, correct?
Yeah, who was overly dramatic about the animals. And
honestly, him and Fred Willard are probably the best parts of the episodes.
I could just watch them have a scene. It would have been great.
Yeah, no, I just kind of want to see a sitcom taking place at the zoo they work at and just all of their antics.
Go down the road. It's not really a road. It's just that path that we call a road in the zoo.
Yeah. That's good. So I guess that's most of them. I don't know. The other ones are okay. Like, Chris Isaac is fine. He's basically just there to make a singing joke at the end of it.
Pretty much, yeah. Him and Phoebe sing Smelly Cat at the end, and then she, like, makes a crack about his yodeling, which by 1996 was probably played out.
Yeah, a little bit. And I'm actually a fan of Chris Isaac, both as an actor and as a musician. I really like his music, and I haven't seen him in a ton of movies, but of course he's in, like, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and he was in John Waters' A Dirty Shame, which is great. I do just want to mention, so Van Damme doesn't show up until the 2nd episode in this, so I was a little mad that there was no Van Damme in the first one, and then basically there's the first mention of Van Damme, and then he shows up right afterwards.
Yeah.
And Courtney Cox says several things in a row that I thought were great, and again, this is just like, I feel like this is how I would be talking to anyone if Van Damme was near me. Just like, Jean-Claude Van Damme? Wham Bam Van Damme? The muscles from Brussels? It's like, did you see Time Cop? He totally changed time.
I know. I thought it was so good. And just how fast she sort of reeled it all off.
Oh, yeah.
Was really great. And it really sold the idea that Monica would indeed be really stoked to meet Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh, yeah. And then the conflict comes because she's too scared to go talk to him. And Jennifer Aniston has no idea who he is. And she's like, whatever, I'll go tell him you think he's cute. And he goes over there, or she goes over there, and Van Damme immediately starts macking on her.
Right. Like, there's not even I don't even think she got a word out before he was just like, why, hello. You know, and he doesn't say anything. He just, like, gets real close. Like, his face just moves really close.
Oh, yeah, and he has that smirk going.
Yeah, and he's still in, like, the soldier's uniform, so he's still in, like, camo. I don't know why.
Which, even on the date later on, I guess they just had him for a day or something, but he's wearing the same outfit from the movie, so...
Yeah. You know, he blends in.
Honestly, he's suave. He's suave. I saw that scene where he's kind of hitting on Rachel, and I was like, I'd go for that. Like, yeah, he totally got me with that.
Well, she immediately was just like, ah, ah. So, you know, obviously it worked.
Yeah, and basically the whole plot of that is that Van Damme drives women to madness.
Yes, absolutely.
And can break up the best of friends.
And then they have a slap fight in Monica's apartment over Van Damme.
I really hated both of the whole fighting scenes, and especially the sweater and marinara sauce part. But again, Lisa Kudrow is excellent in those scenes, and I love how she corrals them. And even like her kind of lame joke of like, if this was prison, you'd be my bitches. That got a laugh out of me.
Yeah. It's just, she's so joyful when she says it, I think is part of it. She just has this like cute, you guys would be my bitches. And it's just really, it's endearing.
Yeah, and I was actually always kind of sad that Lisa Kudrow never got to quite the movie level stardom that like your Jennifer Anistons or Courtney Cox did. But she still like had some good parts, and she's still in stuff quite often. I don't know, I felt like she never quite jumped to the A-list the way that some of the other people on the show did. But then again, none of the guys from the cast really were able to do that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, David Schwimmer's biggest thing in a while has been O.J. Simpson.
Yes, I haven't seen that yet. Did you watch that?
I didn't watch it. I've only seen the ESPN documentary, which is phenomenal. But we're not here to talk about that. I do have a working theory, however, about David Schwimmer, that his character Sobel in Band of Brothers is not too far from his real life. There's something about David Schwimmer that just makes me think, you're a jerk, man. I don't know what it is about him, but I'm just like, no.
Oh, no, yeah.
No, sir.
He just has a punchable face. That's what it is. There's an episode of Crest Celluloid we did on 6 Days, 7 Nights, the Harrison Ford and Heche movie that he is in. And for most of the podcast, we were just dissecting just how schlubby and just like awful David Schwimmer is. Like, we just hated him in it. And he seems like a perfectly fine guy.
Yeah, no, I'm convinced that he didn't have to do much method acting to get into the character of Sobel for Band of Brothers.
Lisa Kudrow is wonderful, and she does pop up and stuff. She was in the Neighbors films as the Dean recently. I think she had some TV show, but a lot of her movies where she's the star, like the best or the biggest ones I can think of, she did that movie like Lucky Numbers with John Travolta, which was pretty terrible. She did Marcy X with Damon Wayans, was it? I don't remember, but yeah, just not a lot of luck for her.
No, and it's sad because she's really smart too.
Oh yeah.
Like you hear her in interviews and things like that, and you know, I think she's got like a degree in science, and she's bilingual, and you know, she's uber smart.
Which I think is why she was able to play that character so well. Like, it's so different. Like, she just seemed to have so much fun playing that kind of ditzy character.
Yeah. So I'm a Phoebe fan myself, so I will go to bat for Phoebe every day. But yeah, she's basically the voice of reason in this episode, or this second half of the episode.
But again, the conceit is that, oh no, Van Damme, a muscly man with an accent, comes along, and then the best of friends are just like, no, fighting over this guy that is kind of a creep.
I'm sure he saw the script and he was like, yes, this happens to me all the time.
Sure he was.
I'm in. Let's do this.
How do you know about my life?
Yeah. Have you been watching me? Why, yes, Van Damme, we have. The other thing that it kind of reminded me of, though, and I don't know if you know about this episode of Mystery Science Theater, it's called Future War, and it's like a low-rent Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where they couldn't afford Jean-Claude Van Damme, so they have sort of a look-alike Jean-Claude Van Damme standing in as the escaped alien from a planet where humans are slaves or something like that. There's also a Not Ving Rhames.
Ooh, not Ving Rhames. That's my favorite.
He's close to Ving Rhames, but he's not Ving Rhames. And a not Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the hype of I don't know what sort of cinema. There's a point in the episode where the aliens are attacking and they're running down a hall, and it's just made of cardboard boxes.
Interestingly enough, I think I do remember that one, but the not Jean-Claude Van Damme in that, his name is Daniel Bernhardt, and he played the lead character in the Bloodsport sequels that Van Damme did not appear in.
Really? So he's made a career of being not Jean-Claude Van Damme?
Yeah, he's the go-to not Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Amazing!
But yeah, I know what movie you're talking about, yeah, and Robert Zadar is in it as well, but yeah.
Yes, Robert Starr.
Yeah. Oh,
May
that's
he rest in
lovely.
peace.
Yeah, oh, man. He was so good. I was sad. He didn't really. He didn't have a cameo in Samurai Cop 2 like I had hoped he did, which was sad.
Aw. It was a hard life.
It was, but man, he made the most of it.
He did. When he showed up, you knew he was there.
Oh yeah, and he threw himself into every film. But back to Friends.
Yes. Sorry,
Again, and this is tough because there is so little Van Damme in here. There's so little to talk about with him. But I will talk about one scene in this that completely grossed me out. And possibly not for the reasons you'd think, but it's during the whole Julia Roberts, Matthew Perry bathroom scene where she basically gets him to wear her panties and then take his clothes off, and then she runs out with his clothes to get him back.
Can I stop you? Is it the fact that she's barefoot in
Yes!
the bathroom?
Oh my god, that was so disgusting.
Yes. No, I saw that, and I don't know if I had blocked it out or what, but I saw that, and I'm like, that is the nastiest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I don't care that they are in a fancier restaurant. That is a public bathroom.
Nope. And I'm like, why did she take her shoes off? This makes no sense.
God, it was,
No, the shoes. I mean, at least Chandler had socks on.
Yeah, but no, like, that actually made me gag a little bit. Just the idea of that, just, ugh. So much pee on the floor.
Like, there's the weirdness of it in general, but the fact that you can just see her bare feet through the whole scene.
And that she would be so comfortable doing that as well.
She's like, I really think I should take my shoes off in this scene. I think it would be more realistic.
So I guess we'll talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme's second to final scene in this, which is when he actually does go on a date with Monica as well. So they're walking and talking, and she's asking him, like, can you beat that guy up? Can you beat that guy? Like, I saw sudden death, and now I'm here with you. And Van Damme lets her know that the reason he said yes to going out with her was because Rachel told him that she was really wanting to have a three-way with him and Drew Barrymore. And he does a great delivery on the line right after that, which is, now Drew has some ground rules.
Yes, and he just walks away.
Yeah.
It's so majestic. He's just like, I've dropped my line, I'm gonna get the laugh, and I'm gonna walk away.
I read, I think, the Wikipedia page about this episode, which is where I found out that it was like the highest watched episode. But apparently they were trying to write jokes for Van Damme to say, and were having a problem with it because he wasn't really a comedian, he had the accent and everything. So they apparently spitballed ideas by just saying jokes in a really bad French accent, and anything that got a laugh in the room, they'd be like, that's for Van Damme. Which sucks, because he has a natural, like, he has his, charisma and everything, but he has natural comedic timing and sensibility.
I was genuinely impressed that he was as funny as he was, because you don't expect that from him. That's not, or at least at this point in his career, it's certainly not something that you would expect from him. And he was funny, he was charming. He seemed to not be taking himself that seriously.
Yeah. Which I'm wondering at this point if he would still had a really bad cocaine problem. Because I know in '94, around the time of like Street Fighter and Time Cop, he really did, but I think he was still into that at the time, because then his kind of direct-to-video years came and stuff like that. And actually, I guess I should bring this up. Just recently I saw a story where Van Damme was doing a satellite interview with Australian television, and he babbled on and on and on, and then ended up walking off the set. My first thought was, I'm really scared he's back on cocaine. Which I hope he's not, because he's having such a good resurgence right now. Yeah,
I saw that. I saw him just sort of rip the mic off and kind of storm out off camera. And I did not, it was the 90s in Hollywood. Who didn't have a drug problem? But didn't realize that perhaps that was something else that was going on.
Yeah, and it could be something else, because again, they were asking him the same old questions. They were asking him about Kylie Minogue and stuff, which makes sense, because I think she is Australian.
She is Australian.
Yeah, so they were asking him, but again, like, he, years and years ago, did an interview where he said, yes, they had an affair, and I'm sure he's tired of talking about that.
Yeah.
And he is very kind of sporadic and stuff like that with the way he talks, and so it's not that different, because I've seen plenty of videos for him, and that's just kind of how he is. He's high energy, constantly talking and kind of babbling, but I don't know if he was just having a bad day or what, but that was my first thing. It's like, I just hope he's not back on drugs or something. I hope he's okay, my friend.
We're sending you good vibes, Jean-Claude. Stay safe.
Yeah. And, you know, if everyone turns their back on you, you can, of course, come be on Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'll have you. I believe in you.
You won't ask him about Kylie Minogue.
No, I won't. I'll just ask him if he can beat people up. And ask him to flex his muscles for me.
You see this cat? Can you beat this cat up?
Can you pick this cat up with your foot?
It'd be really cool if you could pick up 2 cats and then do the splits.
I feel like if I ever met him, I would be so annoying to him that he would probably hit me or kick me, but I would be honored to have that happen, so I'd be like, thanks, JCVD.
There's a picture of you two in like an emergency room and you're giving the
With the
thumbs
thumbs up, yeah. Which, by the way, I was working on the logo picture for this episode before we started, and that's the image I went with, was when Rachel's like, she said, okay, I'll see you tonight. And that smile and the thumbs up, that's totally the picture.
Perfect.
Oh yeah, and I guess there is one final scene of Jean-Claude Van Damme at the very end during the credits, because Joey ends up getting a small part in the movie as a dying person. And again, another pretty good comedic scene of Van Damme, like, acting, and that's totally how he acts in films, but just like, Jesus, this man is dying! Can't you see what's going on here? And they keep doing it, and Joey is just terrible. So the final joke is that he's like, Jesus, man! Or, this man is dead! And then they just cover him up, and that's the end.
I love the idea that Joey is the worst actor.
But he's perfectly suited for soap operas.
He's perfectly suited for soap operas, but he's terrible in everything else. But yeah, I enjoy that scene too. Just there's something about repetitive things that I do eventually find. I'll think it's funny, it'll stop being funny, it'll come back around to being funny.
Which is some of the best kind of humor. I love it when it loses it and then it gets you back.
It brings you back in. But yeah, just that they just cover him up at the end and just...
Yeah, and that was around the time there was the credit and Jean-Claude Van Damme as himself. And he's actually done very little TV in his career. I think he was in an episode of Las Vegas as himself as well.
Oh dear.
But I don't think he's really, like, never really had a TV show. He's working on one currently with Amazon, I think, where he plays a detective, but it's, like, called Jean-Claude Van Johnson or something.
Oh my god.
And it's going to be, like, a comedy detective series, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no, meant to be funny.
Okay, good. I was like, oh no.
But yeah, if you enjoyed comedic Van Damme, I highly recommend the movie Welcome to the Jungle, because that's another one where he is just tearing apart his screen image and just making fun of how he is in all of his films, and it just really works. He is fantastic in that. The movie it's pretty funny. It's not that memorable, but he's great in it.
I'll have to check it out. See, you're instructing people with your podcast.
Yeah.
You're teaching.
Well, it's sad. It's just recorded now. This is just me in life. That's why I don't have a lot of friends, and that's why people don't talk to me for very long amounts of time, because I end up going through like, hey, have you seen this? Do you know about this? Hey, Van Damme, let's talk about Van Damme. I just get very excited and then recommend a bunch of movies to people and tell them plots of movies and tell them that the movies that they want to talk about are terrible.
Your film selections are terrible. No, but I will check it out, because I am intrigued now. Thinking back on it and watching this in a slightly more critical way of Jean-Claude sort of playing with his image. I think that's kind of unexpected. I keep saying that, but was really surprised by it.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure him being in this episode of Friends brought a bunch of new viewers to Friends as well, because I could see the people that watch Friends and the people that are really into Van Damme movies not really intersecting that much, but I'm sure it kind of brought those two groups of people together.
I'm telling you, network television brings us all together.
I just imagine, like, how many people, like, our age, or, like, people that were a bit younger at the time that saw that in 96. They were just like, oh, we watch the Super Bowl, which is this thing everybody watches, and then we watch Friends, which is this other thing everybody watches, and then Van Damme gives everyone a good chuckle, a good smile.
Yeah, and then they go to school the next day. Did you see that Jean-Claude Van Damme? He was hitting on Rachel, you know?
I think I totally did that, actually.
Good.
I think the thing I fear most out of doing this episode is that part of me kind of wants to start watching Friends again since it's just there on Netflix. Like, I think I would hate myself, but I might do it.
I'm just saying, it's great to wind down with after work. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm just throwing it out there.
I think I might go get a bottle of wine and spend the rest of the evening watching Friends then.
Watching Friends. It's not a bad way to spend an afternoon. I'm just saying.
Okay, so Amanda, thank you very much for doing this episode. Do you have anything you'd like to plug? Anything you'd like people to check out? Any work or anything that you're interested in right now you want people to check out?
No, because if they check out anything that I'm doing right now, that means I will have to grade their papers. And I don't want more papers graded. No,
you want to give a shout out to your students?
I give a shout out to my students who are already enrolled.
Mm-hmm.
Please stay enrolled, because that means I'll have a job for the fall. If you drop, I might not end up with a job. But yeah, no, I'm working on my dissertation and planning 2 classes, so I'm a barrel of fun right now.
Awesome. Well, now you have some Van Damme in your life, so you can...
And now I have some Van Damme in my
You can
life.
grade papers, work on a dissertation. You can maybe change your dissertation, do one on Van Damme.
I need to figure out a way. I mean, he's a part of visual culture. I'm sure I can figure it out.
Yeah, you can at least drop a reference or 2 in there.
Absolutely. Maybe in the footnotes, I could just be, by the way.
Or you can just have a cover page with just a picture of Van Damme on it.
I'll just, one of my images. It'll just be.
Anyways, thank you very much for doing this, Amanda.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. Hey everybody, quick little addendum to this week's episode. I kind of forgot to go through the actual tropes of Van Damme films, but in this episode, he really has like less than 2 minutes of screen time, so no tropes really show up other than he wears camouflage and throws that beautiful smile at us. I also realized we forgot to give it a Van Damme rating, so I'm going to go ahead and give this Friends episode a Van Damme rating of 3. He has just as much, maybe a tiny bit more screen time than he does in, say, Breakin', but it's so funny, and it's so enjoyable, and he's so charismatic. Like, it's a good 3. It's a good 3 for a half day's work, and I'm sure he'd be fine with that. And we will see you next time on Jean-Claude Van Damme.